Alright, so I recently did my first ever paid food photography job, and in this video I wanted to break down the whole production process, covering everything from how I got the job, how I planned for it, the actual shoot, and then everything that went into the post-production. And just a bit of context about me, I am not a food photographer, and I usually shoot more commercial styled photography, but I thought this would be a fun challenge and would make a cool video. So with that being said, let's jump straight into it, with first covering how I even got the job. And to be totally honest, no special tactics were used here because the client is a friend of my girlfriend's and he was looking to update the photos on his website. And since we'd met a few times before, he knew I was a photographer, so we decided to reach out. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, this was my first time ever shooting food, so I didn't have any prior food photography to show him. But sometimes even when you don't have experience in a specific niche, as long as you have some connections and some type of portfolio, you'll still be able to land some jobs. But now, in regards to the pricing of this job, I jumped on a meeting with the client and discussed the exact deliverables, and after confirming everything, I charged my full day rate because we both realized it was going to be an all-day shoot that consisted of a variety of product-styled shots of over 15 different tarts. And as you'll see later in the video, the client and I both underestimated how much work goes into food photography, so one day was definitely not enough to get everything, but more on that later. After the deliverables and pricing were confirmed, we then entered the pre-production phase of this shoot. And usually the pre-production phase consists of a bunch of meetings with the client, creating mood boards, creating a rough shoot schedule that we can then use to be as efficient as possible on the actual shoot day, and then also figuring out what camera gear I'll be using. So whenever I'm creating mood boards and shot lists for clients, I always use canva.com, which is a free website that makes it super easy to put together these pre-production presentations. And I also like to use Pinterest to get any inspiration photos. And no, this isn't a sponsored ad. I just like using both of them and have been following this process since I started working with clients. But now, in regards to the gear, I use my Sony a7 IV as my main camera, and then I brought a variety of different lenses like my 55mm, 85mm, and the 24-70mm Sony lenses. For lighting, I was advised that using strobes were a lot better for food photography, but I mistakenly lent my AD400 Pro to a friend of mine who was shooting a sports commercial on the same day of this food photography job, so I decided to use my Aperture 120D Mark II for my key light, which is actually the main light I'm using to expose this video. And then I also brought my 5-in-1 reflector and two Aperture f7s just in case I needed extra light on the actual shoot day. Now, one of the main things the client requested was overhead shots of each tart, so I knew I would need to use a C-stand to mount my camera in the overhead position, and I also brought a tethering cable which connected to my computer, and this will allow me to compose my photos and allow me to actually change any camera settings and take photos directly from my computer. So now, with all the mood boards, shot lists, and gear organized, it was now time to shoot. And the game plan for the shoot day was to first start with all the overhead shots and then move into different angles and the detail shots later in the day. Yeah, so we've actually added a honeycomb grid to this softbox just to make the light a little bit more directional. And then we're also using a gray card for the first couple of shots because this will help us when we actually correct the white balance in Lightroom later on when I'm editing. But this is the first setup, and this is the mushroom tart. Now, after we shot the clean photos of each tart, we started to work on the overhead styling shots, and this is where things started to get risky. Because the actual styling of food photography is really where the magic happens, but with that being said, it's the most time-consuming part of this whole process. For me, I usually shoot more run and gun styled photos, so this was a whole new level of patience I had to unlock, and time was seriously ticking because we had to be fully out of the location by 5 PM because there was a big event happening there, so it's safe to say the stress levels started to rise. Alright guys, so it's been a pretty crazy couple of hours. We've had lunch, but we've just realized that we're running out of time, and it's already nearly 2 o'clock and we got to be out by 5:30, and we've got so much more to do. with that being said, this new setup that we're doing is pretty much the top down again, but this time we're styling around each tart. We've just taken the first one, which was the caviar, and we've just taken the uni one. It's getting stressful, guys. We're trying to make it. But in regards of the whole camera setup, same thing, 24-70. A7 IV. We've got two aperture f7s. We've got the key light, which is the aperture 120D. And yeah, man, still tethering everything, but hopefully we can make it, guys. And ganbarimasu. But with all of that being said, we pushed through and started to hit a stride where we were really knocking things out faster and faster. But the shoot day came to an end and there were a few stylish shots that we couldn't capture, but we did make sure to get all the must-haves for the client. So now with all the photos on my SD card and all the gear packed up, it was now time to enter the post-production phase of this shoot. And the post-production phase consists of things like storing and backing up the files, editing, and then finally transferring the final photos to the client. So for the file storage side of things, I usually like to create one folder on my external hard drive that will have all the different assets I'll end up using for this shoot. So for example, if we take a look at the folder here, you can see I have one master folder here, and this folder consists of 3 different folders. So one for the raw photos, one for the Lightroom library, and one for the final edited photos. But anyways, moving on to the editing side of things. So I firstly imported all the files into a new Lightroom library, and from there I used the star rating tool to mark the photos that I would be editing. And when selecting photos inside of Lightroom, I'm usually looking out for things like composition, lighting, and sharpness of each photo. So for example, with these 2 shots here, where the composition and lighting is pretty much identical, I ended up choosing this one because if I zoom in, you can see this photo is a bit more sharper than this one. But now with all of the photos I want to edit selected, I can filter through my selections by clicking on the star icons here, and this will now show all of my selected photos, which then makes everything super simple and clear for us. So from here, I just went on and edited each photo, and some key things I realized is you want to make sure you are keeping the colors as true as possible, especially when shooting tarts or fruits. And for all my color and exposure edits, I use Lightroom Classic. And for any advanced things like removing objects or brightening certain areas, I use Adobe Photoshop. But now, after about 2 days of editing, I had over 50 fully edited photos. And the last step of this process was to now send the final photos to the client. So firstly, to export the photos out of Lightroom, I use the following settings. So under the file settings, I export as a JPEG with the image quality set to 100 and the color space set to RGB. I also make sure that the resolution is set to 240. For the actual sharing side of things, I personally like to use Dropbox because they allow for easy transfer and they don't compress your files. And a big mistake I see a lot of beginners make is sending their files via email or some type of messaging app. And this is something I don't recommend because when you use these types of sharing avenues, your files will get compressed and you will lose quality in your photos. But all I do to send files to my clients is first create a new folder inside a Dropbox, and I usually just name this by first adding the date of the shoot and then adding some keywords about the shoot. So for this example, I just use tart photo shoot. Now with that master folder created, I can now create different folders within it to separate the types of photos from this shoot. So for example, the folder top down clean holds all the photos we took from the overhead angle, but with the clean backdrop. Overhead styled holds all the overhead shots that were styled. And the side angle folder holds all the side angle photos, and I personally like to break up the photos like this because it makes it easier for the client to go in at any time and just locate the style of photos that they're after. But now once all the folders have been created, we can easily upload the files into Dropbox by dragging and dropping them into their designated folders. And once everything is nicely organized and uploaded, all I do is go back into the master folder, which is a dated folder with the keywords, and then I'm going to select this share option and then click get link. And this will now create a shareable link that I can then copy and paste to my client. I also like to add this pre-made PDF showing my clients how to properly export the files out of Dropbox just in case they're using this software for the first time. Now from here, my clients can easily click this link and it will open up a folder that holds all their photos, and they can now easily download them directly from Dropbox, and they can also share this link with their colleagues or anyone else who may also need to see them. But now with the file sent and approved, the last thing to do is just send over an invoice for payment, and once the cash hits my bank account, that officially wraps up the whole shooting process for this food photography job. And some takeaways that I have about this shoot is, firstly, food photography is a lot harder than it looks. Secondly, it takes a lot longer than it looks. And thirdly, it was super fun, and I'm definitely going to give it another crack. And I'm going to try to get more creative with the lighting and compositions. The only thing I would have done differently is organizing with the client to maybe stretch this shoot over 2 days, and I think that would have allowed us to really take our time with each tart and to also capture more variety of angles and lighting. But at the end of the day, the client was super happy with the results, which means I'm happy, and overall it was a success. And with that being said, I appreciate you for making it this far in the video. If you found some value from it, hit the like and subscribe button on your way out, and be sure to check out the video on the screen because this is what YouTube thinks you should watch next. Peace out.